Mr. John Dramani Mahama, former president of Ghana and the leader of the opposition National Democratic Congress, welcome to the Voice of America. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Mahama, we'll start out with what brings you to Washington, what brings you to the United States?
I'll make a quick correction first. I'm former president, and the leader of our party is the chairman of the party. What happens is when we are in opposition, the leadership reverts to the chairman of the party. So I came at the invitation of Liberty University, so I just flew in from Lynchburg, where the university is. I came to participate in the 500 CEO Summit, and I also had the opportunity to address convocation of the university, and then also participate in a program they've introduced about doing business in Africa, where they bring African business people and leaders to talk with American business people about how it is to do business in Africa and what the opportunities there are.
Mr. Mahama, the next presidential election in Ghana will be in 2024. Have you officially thrown your hat in the ring? Do you plan to run again?
No, I haven't, Heidi.
Well, you know, word on the street, let me put it that way.
Well, it's good to keep your opponent guessing. And so even if I'm not running, I'm not going to say I'm not running. So a decision will be taken early next year in the first quarter. That's when we hold our party's primaries for the presidential candidacy, and we'll see.
So at this point, you say you can neither confirm nor deny?
Of course.
Well, so, you know, turning to the situation in the country, and you have been very outspoken about the economic turmoil that you are seeing in Ghana. The country is enduring deep economic problems, rampant inflation. Now, of course, this is not unique to Ghana. We're seeing this globally. But we saw protests in the country in June against the high cost of living. And you've, for a long time, called on the government to accept assistance from the IMF. It has now changed course and has turned to the International Monetary Fund for help. But Mr. Mahama, you also came under fire about how you handled the economy during your tenure. Should you run for president, should you have a chance to lead your country again, what would you do differently that you didn't do the first time around? What would you do differently next time?
I'll just say something a little bit to look at the two circumstances under which we went into the IMF. We are all members of the IMF, and so it's a body we go to when you have some macroeconomic instability. And so at the time I was president, yes, we suffered macroeconomic instability due to two factors, internal and external. External, you get shocked from time to time. We had the commodity price shocks, the slowdown in China. But internally, we overshot our expenditures because we introduced a new wage policy that sought to make the remuneration in the public sector more uniform. And it shot the wage bill far above what we had anticipated. Almost 73% of our revenues was going to pay wages and salaries alone. And so that forced us to go into the IMF. This government has twin problems. One is macroeconomic instability because expenditures far exceed revenues. Revenues are not performing properly. But then the second thing is also that they went on a borrowing spree and they've pushed our debts to levels that are unsustainable. Just recently, the World Bank came and said we had almost 104% of debt to GDP. And so we have twin problems. One, to achieve fiscal consolidation, and two, to bring debts back to sustainable levels. So that's what they're faced with. What I'll do differently, the economy is situated in an environment. It does not exist in isolation. And so there are some things that need to be done to create an environment for the economy to thrive. And some of them are governance issues, strengthening state-owned institutions, the fight against corruption, you know, and so many other things that create the environment for the economy to thrive. I think that if we go into this program and we bring debts back to sustainable levels and we're able to get the bridging facility in order to achieve policy credibility so that investors again feel confident that they can bring their money into Ghana, then we must start from there and maintain that prudence. This should be the last time we go to the IMF. I mean, because going and coming and going and coming, I mean, it's really, it creates a certain instability in the whole system, and it also reduces the faith that people have in our democracy. One of the things that we will do when we come back, that's the NDC. I didn't say I because we're not sure who will lead us. One of the things that we'll do is to, like I said, strengthen state institutions, strengthen the anti-corruption institutions, but most importantly, look at the Constitution again. We've been operating this Constitution for more than 26 years. And I think that the time has come for us to look at it again and do some tweaking in order that we can have a more a proper constitutional environment in which to grow the economy. And so those are some of the things that we'll look at. In 4 years, we have a 4-year term. Like they have in America, not like in other countries where they have 5 terms. And so there's very little you can do in terms of infrastructure. We'll do our best, invest in the health sector, invest in education, invest in the economic infrastructure. But all this must be geared towards creating opportunities for especially young people to be able to realize their full potential, be able to find jobs in the economy. I think that that's what we'll be looking at.
And in your experience, does a loan from the IMF cure all economic ills?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You see, what happens is you can implement a homegrown fiscal consolidation policy, which is what we wanted to do. But unfortunately, a lot of local and foreign investors, would probably doubt that you can live by the promises that you make unless you have an institution like the IMF, working together with you, because they know that if you have the IMF supervising, they're going to be marking and making sure that you meet the obligations that you have set out. And that is why an IMF program becomes important. That's why I said it's for policy credibility. Once IMF comes and puts a stamp and says, look, we accept what Ghana wants to do, and we're going to walk along with Ghana in order to be able to implement this program that they have brought, then that increases investor confidence, both outside and inside, that you'll be able to achieve the things that you set out. But aside from that, IMF will give you money to show up your foreign reserves, and you need that money to stabilize your currency. And so if government is able to reach accommodation with IMF, which will be dependent on if they're able to reach agreement with our creditors, because of the debt must come to sustainable levels before the IMF will give you a program. And so if they're able to do that, then the IMF will give Ghana is looking for $3 billion. I don't know how much the IMF is going to give, but anything between $1.5 billion and $3 billion would help shore up the reserves.
I mean something similar to what Zambia has.
Yes, exactly. Our situation is similar to Zambia. Zambia had a twin problem, both the debt and fiscal consolidation.
Correct.
And now they've got a program. I think they have had their negotiations for debt sustainability, and I think they're well on their way now. And so Ghana is next. Well,
and they also didn't get the higher figure that they wanted, but I
but
can
I guess
understand.
their economy is stabilizing quite well. The kwacha has made us one of the best performing currencies in Africa.
Correct. Just 2 days after.
Unfortunately, in Africa, in Ghana, we have taken over the mantle of the worst performing currency, not only in Africa, the world.
So another part of taking IMF loans is, of course, the conditions attached, the conditionalities, which many countries and many people in general on the African continent are always wary about. They think IMF conditionalities, cuts in social spending. Would you advise the Ghanaian government to cut, you talked about rampant spending, to cut spending, and where? What kind of spending? Social services?
People think about the IMF in the old sense of what it was. The IMF has gone through a lot of reform. They're not going to come and tell you to cut social spending. They're going to ask you to bring a program. Your revenues are much lower than your expenditure. How are you going to bring it in sync? And you have to tell them where you can cut. And so you are going to cut. They are not going to cut. You get my point? And so If you're spending too much money on something, you have to decide whether you think that is